The journey to make Highlander 2 would take its filmmakers on a passionate adventure to the distant country of Argentina. For some, it would be an opportunity of a lifetime. For others, it would become a nightmare. For it would take more than 13 years and 3 versions to redeem the film from the hypnotic sway of the tango.
There can be only one.
Fox basically threw Highlander 1 away. They had a curious disrespect for the intelligence of the American people. The film opened and closed, and we were grotesquely depressed. And then a couple of weeks later, we went over to Paris for the opening there, where everything was, it was different. It was a completely different thing.
The word was out in Europe that this was a unique picture and that Russell had brought something very, very interesting to bear on the film. Whereas Fox in the States said, people will never understand these flashbacks.
When I saw the posters that were going to be released for Highlander in America, of this strange close-up of Christoph in black and white, looking like some serial rapist, the poster made no sense, and it was like sort of a negative campaign in many respects. Whereas you went to Paris for the premiere, and you had gigantic billboards and cut-out statues of Lambert and Connery lining the avenues of Paris, and there was a celebration.
In France, it was like a rock and roll concert. We came on stage with people screaming, running down the alleys, then the movie started, then we came back on stage afterwards, and I mean, it was a riot.
Then I think it really hit us.
We've been royally screwed by 20th Century Fox.
All over the world, this movie became an instant cult movie. I mean, it's one of the biggest franchises in the world today. Nobody expected that.
And no one expected that the birth of a sequel would be conceived overseas.
We got such support from the foreign distributors. We would go to Cannes and they would come up and say, when are you doing this? When are you doing this? We want this for our marketplace. There's a real desire to see another Highlander film. We could be persuaded.
And we said, well, you know, the movie ended and everybody was dead and he was mortal and life was going on. And they said, you'll figure something out. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay.
The burdens of giving birth to a franchise are, I think, quite heavy, because it seems to me that you must be true to the strength of the characters that you have created and the circumstances in which those characters are operating. It's vital that they continue to work.
Remember, MacLeod, you called me.
And if you have a very potent and powerful love affair in Highlander 1, then you want to try to think of some way to spin the romantic relationships in Highlander 2. I think the responsibility to the characters that you have created and remaining true to what it is that's powerful about the myth of immortality and the problems that that gives rise to for your hero.
We were introduced to Argentina through a very good friend of ours, a gentleman named Alex Sessa, who became our co-producing partner down there. We were very favorably impressed with the potential breadth of locations that we found in that country. On the financial side, the crew costs in Argentina were approximately 1/3 of the basic crew costs in Europe. The savings were to be $8 to $10 million less to shoot it in Argentina.
The city itself, Buenos Aires, gave us lots of options. But many of these things just become more apparent. The more you look, the more you see, and the more useful things become. So we were able to find architectural styles, certainly numerous vehicles and all sorts of other things that just fitted in perfectly well with the way we were putting the film together.
I sort of wanted a neoclassical, futuristic look. Argentina has that old world look with a combination of very modern stuff too. So it really enhanced that. With the shield over the earth protecting it, like the rainforest had nearly overtaken a lot of the world. It was damp and humid. I just wanted everyone to feel that sort of mouldy sense And in summer, it gets extremely humid. So a lot of that was already there.
The scouting itself was good fun. There was a flight we took towards the north of Argentina, which we flew in a small plane, about 20 people.
We fly for about an hour, heading toward the Andes. Gorgeous, absolutely fabulous. Everybody's kind of half asleep, and suddenly we start hitting a little turbulence.
We got stuck in the middle of a storm, hurricane.
The turbulence was like the E-ticket at Magic Mountain. It was like, but we were for real, we're 10,000 feet in the air, and we were being thrown around.
With winds of about 360 miles an hour sideways. The plane wasn't flying straight. It had to fly sideways.
My partner, Peter Davis, who has a notoriously bad travel stomach, immediately grabs for the airsick bag, wham, fills one up.
The only thing I saw for an hour and a half was the back of his neck. His head was in the bag.
Russell's going, "This is not funny. I'm serious. Let's turn back. I don't think this is funny."
Even the pilot in our plane threw up on the windscreen.
When we arrived, we landed on this salt pan.
Just completely like, oh my God, we're on land, and everyone like touched the soil.
And we're all standing there saying, yes, this is a very nice salt pan.
And a little dot appears at the edge of the desert and starts coming toward us and coming toward us.
And a truck arrived, which then unloaded lunch onto a table.
With linens, linen napkins, bottles of water, bottles of wine, an impeccable lunch.
Which was, I thought, rather impressive for somewhere in the middle of nowhere.
I said, I'm not getting back on the plane. And Peter was like, white as a ghost and just like shaking. And
the rest of us got back on the plane and went to another airport, perfectly calm, absolutely delightful flight.
We hailed down this old truck.
Peter ended up having to travel 40 miles on a twisty mountain road and getting sick all over again.
We were introduced and we were seduced. The country is such a pleasing environment, both from a people's standpoint and visually location. You do get seduced. You believe that when you are there, the canvas will be fantastic.
The food is delicious. The men are handsome. The women are beautiful. They have a lifestyle that
Great style.
puts the premium on pleasure, having fun. And yes, you have to squeeze some work in during the day, not the hours that we're used to, but you have to squeeze in a little bit. And then there's lunch, then there's a siesta. And it was so attractive to be there that you kind of said, yeah, we can make this work, and we should be able to make this work.
I think the first Highlander is truly a classic. It's a brilliant piece of filmmaking. When I realized that we'd be doing Highlander 2, I was very excited about it and really thrilled to work with Russell Mulcahy. And there aren't that many directors that make a film that you really have to live up to. So, you know, once the first one's that good, you have to really, really push to get the sequel to hold up to the original.
I was a fan. I'd seen the first one. I liked it a lot. And I liked Russell's work a lot. I thought it had a great look and fabulous locations, sort of like samurai meets sci-fi, you know, in New York City. I like the sleaze of New York. I thought they captured that very well. So, you know, I was very keen on doing the project.
When you read a script for the first time, you file away a little list of the things that make you think, how on earth am I going to do that? And then there's a separate little category for the things that you really want to do and how you can really build those things into something that's bigger and better than you've done before or maybe anybody else has done before. And Highlander gave us the opportunity to do all of those three things.
I had never been to Argentina. I think when I got down there after the first week, I really was like, what the heck have I done? Why did I get myself into this? But it was such a great opportunity, and it really was, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was tough how far away it was, but well, let's face it, every aspect of it was tough, but it was great.
You know, I knew nothing about Argentina. I was just hoping it was going to be as good as Mexico. I read a bunch of travel books and all this, and you know, I wanted to get up to speed on Argentina. I wanted to be as good as Mexico, and it turned out to be Paris. It's a beautiful, sort of run-down European city. It's the best location I was ever on.
From a commercial point of view, the distributors were not interested in Sean Connery being a cameo. They wanted him as a major principal in the piece. They had great confidence that Bill and I would find a way of bringing him back. So we spent a lot of time working on that role and a lot of time reaching a financial arrangement with him. At the end of the day, he was getting $3 million for 6 days' work, which was a serious chunk of change and required us, from a scheduling point of view, be so careful in how we scheduled his time to get him fully in the picture.
It always amused me that the fact that we had a Frenchman playing a Scotsman and a Scotsman playing a Spanish Egyptian, and somehow we got away with it. But it was very important because I think the bond between the two actors and the two characters became very special.
Will I ever see you again?
Who knows, Highlander? Who knows?
When Highlander 1 was over, nobody thought about, oh, let's make a sequel. The reason it was very difficult is because they cornered themselves as just one movie. I was mortal, I could have babies, and I was in love with a woman and being able to live a normal life. End of story. So what do you do now? How do you come back and be immortal again? And that was the problem.
Monday morning quarterbacking is always so easy. Hindsight, you know. If I personally had to do all that over again, I would try to work the ending of Highlander 1 so that it wouldn't appear as though it had all been neatly wrapped up. There would be kind of a cliffhanger kind of quality at the back end there to take one more smoothly into a sequel. And we were not overly enthusiastic at killing Ramirez. It seemed perfectly natural that he would have another part to play in Highlander 2. You had to go again with MacLeod, and they elected to have MacLeod be very old, and then through a set of circumstances, be turned back to the immortal that he was. I mean, you can take it anywhere, but the core idea is the hero lives forever. And what's that like? It's a franchise that can just go on and on and on. It just depends on the quality of the material.
The luster of Argentina's vibrant charm could not conceal the country's old world ways.
It was exciting in its primitiveness, you know, because nothing was there ready to go. And you had to sort of like go with the flow, you know. My assistant said, I'm going to teach you something that's going to help you get through this experience down here since you're not ready for it. And I'm going to give you a little mantra to say when things start to go wrong, which they will do daily. And it's tomatelo con soda, drink it with soda. So it's sort of like an Argentine version of take it with a grain of salt, you know. And I would be on the phone, you know, talking with some vendor or some lab or something, and I'd be going, I'd be on this interminable hold, and it would be tomatelo con soda, tomate, and then everybody around me would be laughing, you know, because they knew exactly where I was coming from.
We were down there, we had committed, whereas we had started with a certain limited number of crew members from the United Kingdom and from America. As we got further and further into pre-production and actual production, we just found that we had to just keep on layering more and more crew members from outside of Argentina to deal with the technical aspects of the show. Even things as basic as lighting equipment. With the fields that we were lighting, we had to fly in massive amounts of lighting gear. They didn't have the capacity.
Although they had the remnants of a film industry, which must at one point have been quite extensive, it had obviously suffered economically. And now there were few people left who really knew how to work in the film business. And in terms of styling, it was quite difficult to find things. They didn't have hire houses like they have in this country, so you were constantly having to raid people's homes or junk shops or markets or all sorts of areas.
Everything was different, and the people were very friendly, but nothing got done, ever. I mean, you really had to do it yourself. And the biggest kick was, when they said lunchtime, it was like 5 bottles of wine on each table, and you're talking about the key grips, the builders, and everybody. If you didn't get your shots done, the major shots, before lunch, there was a major slowdown after lunch. It's like Mexico. You better get it done before 12 or 1. It's siesta time most of the time.
I've probably come closer to getting killed on Highlander 2 than any other project. They get all their scaffolding secondhand from other countries, and you know, you look at it and you're climbing up this thing 60 feet high, and it's really rusted and kind of spooky. And my AC, Clarissa, you know, we went down on a scaffold that was about 30 feet high, and when you hit cement from that height, all hell breaks loose. Those kind of accidents can happen anywhere, but when you put a tight schedule, long hours, a different country, different languages, it's a mess.
We had no idea that we would literally have to bring down everything. We thought there would be the basics. I'm working with a head tailor, and I'm trying to fix something on a mannequin, and I asked for a safety pin. So he goes in, unlocks his office, goes in, unlocks his desk, takes out a briefcase, unlocks the briefcase, goes to a little compartment in the briefcase, unlocks that, takes out a box, and in there is the department safety pin. So I think at that point, Eddie and I realized everything had to come up.
And your day is very ambitious, and the way Russell shoots with all the tracking shots and the crane shots, and you know, all this stuff is very complex, and if people don't get it, instinctively know how to do it and have a lot of practice doing it, it can just take forever.
I think Highlander 2 maybe was the wrong film to shoot there. I think if you go there, you should be a film that actually is set in Argentina, because all you have to do is turn the camera on and it looks wonderful. But to maybe try to create a science fiction, fantasy world down there, I don't think the infrastructure was there to really do it properly.
And you don't know that you're in trouble until you are really into it. It's only when you're on the floor and you have to make your days that the truth really comes out.
And when you're into it, you know, up to your mouth, and it's a constant struggle to keep from drowning.
A lot of ideas were thrown around. You know, Bill worked with Brian Clements on the story of this movie. Part of me liked the idea of him having come from another planet.
3 men of the planet Zeist, hear me.
It was a very, very big leap away from what I would describe as the frame of the film.
I mean, we were laughing a lot on the set about where are you from Zeist, and because, you know, but we were just cornered. And in some ways, the more cornered we were, the more stupid things we had to come up with.
We made a choice to attempt to answer a question that the audience had asked us over and over again. Where do these guys come from? How did this all get started? Well, you know, it probably wasn't a question that we should have answered. And
maybe we didn't do it in the best possible way.
Right.
In fact, it's well known that the dark-haired ladies.
Indeed, it was certainly a landmark film for me, because I did meet my wife on Highlander 2, Diana Oliva-Day, and she plays opposite Sean Connery in the airplane scene. You know, we were introduced on the film, met each other during the filming of that sequence, and got to know each other quite well, and then lost track of each other for. Then about 5 or 6 years later, life brought us back together again. In fact, Bill Panzer got us together, and we got married, and the rest is history.
We decided to use the Groundlings Theater, a real theater for casting, which is not done that often. And Christopher was very involved and very generous, and would come in and would read with the women who were up for the part. He would also read with the bad guys.
Hello. Hello. It was a help to be able to look at people on a stage where you had a kind of Art Deco metropolis. It was important to see an actor within a potential concept of what the sets are going to look like.
It's probably the only time that I've done casting like that, and it was much more of a theatrical type casting. But I think it was a really good way of doing it.
I felt that interviews are always handled much better in a theater-like arena. And it's much more enticing for the actors to be able to perform. I mean, I would love to be able to put everyone on stage, you know, and do it that way, as opposed to little tiny rooms where you want the actor to succeed and score.
and we're still technically at war with Argentina when we got there. So my Argentinian counterpart took me to the main military army base where they manufacture all of their ordnance for the military. I suddenly found myself being driven through the main gates of the main Argentinian military base where all their explosives are, and I'm holding a British passport and we're at war with Argentina. And I suddenly got very nervous that I was going to get arrested as being a spy or something. But
there was a certain strange animosity between the two cultures in a way. And during lunch, bread fights started to happen, where bread was being thrown. But that got to a point where bottles started to get thrown. I think that's when someone said, like, cool it.
They used to play soccer on Sundays, and there would be the English crew versus the Argentine crew, and those got pretty exciting.
There was a lot of blood on the grass.
The British Empire being at stake. For what? 3 rocks. Give it back. Give the rocks to the Argentinian. Who cares? There's nothing on these rocks. Not even a penguin.
the economic problems of Argentina at the time we arrived were quite obvious. We arrived there at the end of October, and I think there were something like 575 Australis to the dollar. By the middle of February, it was 6,250 Australis to the dollar. The supermarkets would close, and you couldn't buy any food because they didn't know what price to put on the products that they were selling.
Every payday, we would have guards with huge bags protected by men with submachine guns coming to the office and putting payments in envelopes because no one would take checks.
And at the very end, they would only take American cash. These same guys with the Uzis would be standing around a bridge table with stacks of $100 bills, all brand new. We never were quite sure exactly where they got them. And there were $500,000 sitting on that table, and next to it were these duffel bags full of Australis, which was their money, which was almost worthless. So that had magic marker written on it. It would say 25 million, and that was Australis. If somebody would take Australis, you just give them these duffel bags full of stuff.
One of the ways I helped keep my department on budget was selling US dollars. I had one of the people I brought from the US that would call me and say, I'm in a kiosk on Florida Street, we need $500 US, and we would get a good exchange rate that way, and that really helped me stay on budget.
I remember being in a bank at one point, and I'm at the end of this queue with my money ready to change it. And I see there's a clock up behind the bank teller, and I look at this clock and I think, goodness me, they've got seconds on this clock. It's really moving very fast. And this was in fact the exchange rate.
You were in a constant never land of not knowing where you were budget-wise because of this inflation aspect.
Peter and I would go down the street from the hotel to a soft ice cream place that was called Fredo. And we would have the Chiquito, the smallest ice cream cone. And as he would raise the prices to keep track of inflation, we didn't even have to look in the newspaper to see what the exchange rate was, because this guy was always so good that we started calling it the Bolsa Fredo, which means like the stock exchange Fredo. The guy was right on the money every time, every Saturday night.
The food was sensational. I mean, you know what a good steak is. Well, you haven't even tasted a steak until you've been to Argentina. I had my assistant, Albert Coleman, came down there, and he says, well, I don't eat much meat, he said. And I said, well, I think you're going to change your tune on that one, but first of all, you're not going to find too many millet loaf or vegetables on the menu anywhere, and once you taste those steaks, you're going to be going for it. We ate steak every night.
We actually built a model. It gave us views and aspects of the set immediately and all the options that we had there. So all those options were apparent, and they were quite detailed.
The model was very important to work out the strategy of the wires of who could fly where and do this aerial sort of battle sequence. It's all about geography, where the cameras are going to be, What are we going to see and who's going to be where?
We constructed virtually all of the street. There were a couple of scrappy little buildings, one of which we did involve in the set a little bit, but mostly it was all built from scratch. The bridge, cinema, all of those things, catwalks, were all built. It was approximately a mile long, built in about 3 to 4 months.
This was a real porteño kind of set, you know? And that's what they call people from Buenos Aires. They're port people. And they're porteños and porteñas. And this was definitely a porteña kind of set. You know, it was right there by the water, a lot of mosquitoes.
The railway was in fact there, and we were very lucky to have that there, which is one of the main reasons we went there, because that was again a script requirement. We didn't want to have to build a railway line.
We needed a train because we needed to cut the guy's head off in the fight. There are 2 places maybe in Buenos Aires where there were train tracks that were possible. One was a fairly full place that could have been dressed to look somewhat like the street. That would have cost about 20% as much. And the other was to find a place that just had the railroad tracks and to build this entire city around it.
So we decided to do the prudent thing and build the entire city.
Right, there was really no choice. Once we saw those drawings and then, you know, had a glass of wine at lunch, it was, don't cry for us.
We were able to discuss what we needed effects-wise to be built in so that when we got to the explosion scenes and the destruction scenes and the flying scenes, we had all of our things already built in and allowed for. I'd got an idea of building a flying rig on the back of a pickup truck. It was a huge crane arm that you could swing round and round. You could hang somebody on the end of it, counterweight them. You could spin them on the end of it. You could drive the truck up and down the street so that you had the ability to fly somebody very fast along a street and then swing them round and fly them back the other way. It also meant you could get under structures or over structures by pivoting the crane arm.
A lot of rigging on the overhead wiring. It was like 10 feet off the ground. And then you had a harness coming down. Every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes when we'd make a shot, you'd hear this, and 40 guys were like football players pushing a sled. And they all had a hold of this big rope with dots in it, and they were running like hell to give him his momentum to take off and go.
Are the Lakers winning is what I want to know.
And I haven't seen any actors especially flying a block and a half, going 30 miles an hour, with skipping on top of cars with sparks and making turns in the air with these guys, the 2 aliens coming down.
Flying blades?
We developed a system where we ran wires down the legs of the guys that were actually doing the flying with elastic inside and outside of their legs so that they could actually put weight on the hoverboards. And when they lifted their legs, it would seem as though the boards were lifting them up. So it gave them a sort of organic look.
I was flying literally, so it was a lot of fun and very exciting. If you look at the movie, this is something I haven't seen yet done as well in any other picture. And it was a gamble because we didn't have the technology that we have today. It was new what we were doing, and it's great. I love that kind of stuff.
I nearly had to go back to my rock and roll video filmmaking, which was, you know, a bit of string and stick and cardboard and movie magic the old-fashioned way. In some ways, the first release of Highlander 2 is effects done the old-fashioned way.
There was no obstacle or no matting and backdrop stuff. This was actually shot and done the way it was. Very physical and very difficult. It was a masterpiece when it came to that type of work. I've never seen anything as good or better. Tying in cars and the city and the buildings, flying that low. These guys did a wonderful job photographing it and rigging it. That was one of 3 or 4 things in this movie I have never seen before, and I don't think I'll see again.
90% of it we were doing in camera. We were doing for real. And I think it's becoming a little bit of a lost art today. The opportunity to do it that way gives you a much more realistic look. I think there is a tendency now for people to go straight to a CGI.
Of course, the really cool thing was John Richardson was going to blow the whole thing up. And that was amazing. I mean, to see, 4 city blocks, one building, one car, one intersection after another go off was just astounding. I mean, it took them, I think, 2 or 3 weeks just to rig the pyro in it. We must have stood back, I think, about a quarter of a mile. And the amazing thing was that the whole city block went off in stages.
The idea that the ozone layer is depleted and that life on the planet has become so unsupportable that it requires an artificial shield, which is conveniently managed by a kind of soulless multinational corporation interested only in profits, continues to be very topical.
How about, for starters, that there simply isn't enough energy on the planet to take down the shield without killing us all?
It is an interesting paradox that we have a hero who's immortal, but the life of the planet is finite. And so I rather like the fact that our immortal hero is directly addressing a problem which will result in Earth having more of a chance. Using his immortal power, walks into that beam which shatters the shield. So you get a sense of the potential of regeneration, which I think is a pretty strong theme.
There's the gentleman who created those giant statues using a hot wire. Those giant foam blocks that he would cut with that hot wire and rough these things out and glue them together, then work with a file and create these monstrous statues that you see all through the film.
Bravo, bravo.
He had a giant studio because these things are really big. That's all he did was, Russell would say, we need a 25-foot eagle. And the guy got it, and he would carve these things and they would paint it. It looked absolutely wonderful.
There's a certain tragedy about the statues, in a way, of a time gone by, of a quality of proudness and humanity that's maybe disappeared. So the statues, in some ways, have a sense of tragedy about them.
There are a number of ways to break the stress in Argentina, which were really, really a lot of fun. Needless to say, the women are absolutely beautiful in Argentina, so my whole crew was really happy. In fact, they didn't want to leave, which was its own little problem. But actually, the nightlife, the clubs are amazing. They're off the chart. They go till the sun rises. So as the visual effects unit, there's nothing better than showing up on a set and saying, oh, your shot isn't going to happen until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. So we could actually take our drivers and go out to a club for 3 or 4 hours at 5 in the morning.
But for the producers, it wasn't all fun and games.
Once you have started, because it is a bonded picture, which means that the completion bond has an obligation to deliver a finished picture, they are more hooked than us as producers because they have to finish. If they abandon, they will write off every cost up to that point. So even though they know they're in a disastrous situation, they have no option but to continue. But that doesn't mean that their relationship with the producers is wonderful, because it clearly wasn't.
It certainly was not. There were very difficult times, and it just kept getting worse. Even if you finished the day in the proper number of hours, got the shots you wanted, it still ended up costing more every single day.
Filmmaking in itself can be exhausting. Also dealing with problems that you normally don't have to deal with. The monetary problems of the film started to overshadow some of the safety aspects. There were some close accidents that happened. A lot of attention was going towards that and not towards the way one professionally makes a movie.
Every day became a confrontation, a battle of wills between the producers, the bonding company, the director, each one with their own agenda. The bonding company wanting just to finish the picture, the producers wanting to finish it within the creative concept that they had, but still having a responsibility to the budget, and the director wanting the best possible creative piece that he can put out. These cross currents in making this movie there were extreme.
But at the end of the day, You could go out and you'd be in Buenos Aires, and you could go to La Biela, or you could go to Munich and have a wonderful time, and everybody would say, no, no, it'll be better tomorrow. Don't worry, it's gonna be fine. And for a few hours, you'd kind of let yourself get lulled into feeling that that was gonna be the case, and then the next morning, or when you got back to the hotel, the hammer dropped again.
I had this idea that if we built our own elevator and we counterweighted the elevator, we could use a descender rig. We built it with enough strength and integrity and control. It was safe enough to put the real actor on, and Christophe was game for it.
Bye, Chris. All right. Bye, Chris.
It was quite a daunting thing to be on, and this thing started to drop, and your stomach suddenly came up in your throat. But you had various things to hang on to on the top of the elevator. With the descender rig, we were able to control its braking and stop it a couple of feet short of the ground.
Generally, when you're on an elevator, you're inside the elevator, not on top of the elevator. In the movie business, you can be on top. So I don't want to miss that. That's the reason I love making action movies. I'm doing things that I cannot do in real life. I don't want to miss them.
Joe would like a suit of clothes by 3 o'clock.
My fondest memory from the production is one night, Sean Connery and just a couple of people went out tango dancing. And it was unbelievable. I even had to think to myself, you're dancing the tango with Sean Connery. I have to go home and call my mother and tell her this. She won't believe it. His Sean-ness. That evening itself was like a scene in a movie. A little kid from Los Angeles doing the tango with Sean Connery in Buenos Aires. Not bad.
When we got to Argentina and we were taken around, there was this quite spectacular dam that they could release water, and it wasn't necessarily in the script as part of the escape, but you sort of reworked the script according to what's available.
The original thought was that the stunt guys were all going to jump in the water and slide down the slippery slope that the water was going down. Just before they started shooting there, discovered that there were all sorts of underwater obstructions and things that might be a little bit uncomfortable for people sliding down.
We were on these sleds and we're going to sizzle in and then start to fight. I was there with one other stuntman, and we found out the last minute, if we go 10 feet too far, these giant metal spikes come up to break up any rocks and stuff, and we would have been impaled on them. I would have been gone, and so would the other guy.
So they came up with the idea of the cable rigs. And I think my guys ended up working for 5 days and nights to get the cables and rigs set up.
It was frightening because we're coming down to this big bridge where the chopper went under and all that, coming down a wire that fast, freezing on top of it. Half the time you wish you got killed. I mean, we were frozen. It was freezing on all of this water coming down and the water rushing under you. It was pretty exciting stuff to do.
Only in Argentina could you find something that spectacular looking, where they would allow you to turn the water off and on.
It affected the farmers downstream for about 4 years, but we got our shots.
There were an awful lot of things that we had planned that we were never able to do. I mean, the battle sequence in the Valley of the Moon was one. We had designed as being this huge battle, a completely out-of-this-world look, and doing things really much bigger and better than they'd been done before. And we had the whole thing worked out, we had the whole thing planned, but we never got to film it.
It was traumatic. I'd never been in, and have never since been in a situation where the plug was pulled and you actually thought to yourself, well, hang on, have we finished the movie? Because it all happened very quickly, the crumbling domino effect. So it wasn't really until one got back that one realized that the film really wasn't quite finished.
Russell was out of his mind, and Peter and Bill were devastated because they only wanted to make a good movie. and to finish it the way it started. But the Bond company was not flexible.
There was a sequence that we call the mountain chase sequence that we thought was really a sequence we had to have. We came into serious conflict with the bonding company on that sequence. We got into the shooting and they shut it down, and that's when they really said, we're taking this show over totally.
Highlander introduces you to a whole other world. This is the world of somebody who lives forever. This is what his room looks like. He's got 400 years of crap on the walls, you know. This is what it looks like.
It's almost like being on the time machine. I think this is something that everyone feels like they wish they could do this. They wish they could live forever. They wish they could experience everything. I think there's a certain melancholia involved in that also, which is a sweetness about the Highlander. He has to see things that he loves grow old and die.
It's difficult to cope with it in one life, but if you have to cope with it with 10 lives, it must be amazingly painful. Therefore, I think the most important is the positive side, the optimistic side of looking at life, and the incredible mental stamina that it requires to go through the ages and over the pain that comes with it.
We're all striving for immortality in some fashion, whether it's through our work as filmmakers or writing or artists or whatever. You're trying to do something that outlives you, because, you know, unfortunately, we're in these fragile bodies.
All those kinds of things are very powerful, and I think they resonate strongly and deeply in the human psyche.
But at the time we got back to Los Angeles, the bonding company had totally taken the picture over. They had fired our editorial staff. They had brought their own editorial team onto the show.
It's not the high point of my career. I didn't see it to the end. I wasn't entirely happy with my first cut. I was very anxious to do the recut. And as it turned out, I wasn't given that opportunity.
You work hard in a film and it's your baby, so you try to not throw all the baby out with the bathwater. You know, you try to keep at least the head. I think it was important to the film.
It was a complete nightmare. All of a sudden, people who had been allowed in the cutting room were not allowed in the cutting room. All the creative shifted. You had a new set of bosses. Different producers came in. At the end of the day, we're just like a horse with a different rider on it. And all of a sudden, this rider was like totally into purely finishing the film from an insurance company standpoint.
And they were going to deliver their cut as quickly, as economically as possible. And I must say that when we saw their cut, we weren't very happy, were we, Bill?
No, it was terrible.
There were holes in the film which we hadn't done, and story points and action sequences and whatever that hadn't been shot. I don't know. It wasn't quite the film that was planned, but it had a beginning and an end and something in the middle.
They, in their infinite wisdom, decided that we would not be able to finish everything that we'd bitten off to chew, which we felt that we could. But they panicked at the last minute with like 3 weeks to go. They just chopped and moved things. So they gave a bunch of work to a company that really didn't give a damn about signing it or anything else. So what you have is a beautiful matte painting of the SHIELD complex in one shot that we finished. 5 minutes later in the movie, you see it again and it looks horrible. And that's why a lot of the movie goes up and down in terms of quality.
Decisions were made that had to be made. The film really wasn't in my hands anymore.
We basically got jerked around a bunch of different directions and then had to figure it out because we shot 50,000 feet of film for SHIELD elements. And by the time everybody got in the kitchen and started trying to agree on what this thing was going to look like, we wound up with 7 feet of film that everybody agreed out of 50,000. So you wound up with like a red shield stuck on top of a blue set, and by then it was too late because in their infinite wisdom they had said this will be done. And we were all just dying. I mean, you know, you look at it and go, it was never supposed to look like that. How did we get there? And it's like too many people going for the steering wheel, you know?
That is part of the price you pay. We went to the background until the turn came around again, as it always seems to do.
Then help arrived from an unexpected source. Nigel Green, who has the the largest independent distributing company in England, and he said, I believe in this movie, and I don't want this movie this way.
We just did not feel that even with the existing material that we had, that they had realized anything near what the material was capable of delivering. We went to work editorially, and the bonding company's cut was never used.
Highlander 2 gained immortality from the home video revolution. It bestowed the gift of not just one, but two opportunities to restore the original vision. First, in the Renegade version that reworked the story, and now the ultimate version with its reconceived visuals.
When we originally put together the Renegade version, the series was rolling along and the third movie was being done, and we decided it was time to go back and redo this to have it fit into the Highlander legend as it had been expanded.
Zeiss has been cut out and it's now on Earth in the distant past. So it's a little bit more palatable, and I think it makes the story smoother. I think the new storyline makes a lot more sense.
We got everybody back, we found a location, and we shot it, the mountain chase scene.
Whatever happens, don't stop.
What?
It was very difficult to go back to the same movie 4 years later because it is not a usual process. Now, at the end of the day, the result is good, but me as an actor, no, it wasn't very enjoyable. It's like eating leftovers.
I was talking to Sam Nicholson. We've all stayed friendly. We were chatting, and he was showing me through his facility, Stargate Digital. And we were looking at all this stuff, and he was showing me the work that he was doing, and I said, we could do some of this for Highlander. He said, absolutely. We went to Lionsgate and said, we want to redo the picture, bring it up to today's standards, and redo the special effects using today's absolute high-def, highest quality stuff. And everybody went, wow, that's a great idea. And new sound, and it's going to be a significantly different looking and sounding movie.
Just the fact that we're redoing it 15 years later, I've certainly never done that before.
It's matured and been re-enhanced the modern way. So you'll see, I think you'll see a very different film, more true to what it was originally intended.
I think the audience is happy about seeing what the director would have liked at the time.
Redemption for Highlander and for all of us.
Redemption arrived at the hands of time, and like any true hero, the Highlander has lived on to fight another day. For that, the filmmakers are grateful, not just for the journey, but for their romance with Argentina.
I've gone back any number of times because now I'm married to beautiful Diana. I go to Argentina a fair amount because I've just fallen in love with the country.
I love to be on locations. Some location, it's fine to shoot there. But this location I went back to because it's such a great place. It was just great fun. It was an incredible souvenir.
We're most proud of the fact that the original version of the picture got finished, and what was enough material and was a strong enough concept that we had the ability to improve it, and that we still find it attractive and appealing enough to want to take it to its final destination. This is it. This is the best version of Highlander 2 that will ever be made.
It is the final chapter.